The early morning of June 22, 1941 begins in uneasy silence along the western border of the Soviet Union. Mist hangs low over fields and forests, and soldiers move through their routines, unaware that history is about to change. Suddenly, the calm is torn apart by the thunder of aircraft engines. German bombers roar overhead, flying low and fast. Seconds later, the first bombs fall, ripping through airfields, barracks, and communication centers. Explosions light the horizon as planes on the ground are destroyed before they can take off. Lieutenant Alexei Gromov is thrown from his bunk by the shockwaves. He stumbles outside to a scene of chaos, buildings burning, wounded men screaming for help, officers shouting conflicting orders. Radios are silent, telephone lines cut. Training and discipline struggle against panic. Gromov gathers the nearest soldiers, his voice shaking as he orders them to take cover and return fire, though the enemy remains mostly unseen in the sky above. Across the field, Sergeant Ivan Kuznetsov moves with grim purpose. He drags stunned recruits into trenches, slaps helmets onto bare heads, and forces machine gun crews into position. Dive bombers scream downward, strafing the ground. Dirt and metal rain from the sky. Kuznetsov fires upward in anger more than hope, knowing the shots cannot reach the planes, but refusing to stand helpless. In a nearby village, Nurse Anna Lebedeva is jolted awake by the explosions. Within minutes, wounded soldiers and civilians are carried into a schoolhouse that becomes an improvised medical station. There are not enough bandages, not enough medicines, not enough hands. Anna works silently, cutting uniforms away from torn flesh, ignoring the trembling in her arms. When the building shakes from a nearby blast, she shields a wounded boy with her body and keeps working. By mid-morning, fragments of orders finally arrive. The enemy has crossed the border everywhere. The front is collapsing. Units are told to retreat eastward and reorganize. Columns of soldiers, refugees, and shattered equipment choke the roads. Gromov leads what remains of his platoon through smoke-filled fields, realizing that the war he studied in books bears no resemblance to this nightmare. As night approaches, fires burn across the horizon. The sound of battle never truly fades. Gromov looks back once, toward the darkened west, understanding that this single day has ended an era and begun another. The Great Patriotic War has started, not as a glorious march, but as a brutal fight for survival. The retreat eastward turns into a test of endurance. Roads are clogged with endless columns of soldiers, carts, trucks, and civilians carrying what little they could save. The sky never feels empty, the distant hum of engines is constant, and every shadow sends men diving for cover. Dust coats faces and uniforms, mixing with sweat and blood until everyone looks the same, exhausted and hollow-eyed. Lieutenant Gromov struggles to impose order where order barely exists. He moves along the column, pulling men back into line, forcing stragglers to keep moving. Some soldiers stumble from hunger and lack of sleep, others stare blankly ahead, barely reacting when shells burst nearby. When artillery suddenly opens up from the flank, panic spreads like fire. Men scatter into ditches as explosions tear into the road, shredding vehicles and bodies alike. Gromov drags a wounded radio operator into cover, realizing how helpless they are without communication. Sergeant Kuznetsov is ordered to hold the rear. He positions his squad at the edge of a forest, setting up a machine gun overlooking the road. German reconnaissance units appear cautiously, advancing behind armored cars. Kuznetsov waits until they are close, then opens fire. The forest erupts with gunfire and shouts. The enemy falls back, but not before mortar rounds slam into the trees, snapping trunks and filling the air with splinters. One of Kuznetsov's men is hit. There is no time for proper evacuation, only a quick bandage and a grim nod before continuing. At the river crossing, chaos reaches its peak. Thousands push toward the water as engineers struggle to complete a pontoon bridge under constant air attack. German bombers dive again and again, turning the riverbank into a killing ground. Nurse Anna Lebedeva works without pause, pulling wounded men from the water, treating burns and shrapnel wounds with hands numb from cold and exhaustion. Blood spreads across the river's surface, carried downstream with debris and broken equipment. As dusk falls, the last units begin to cross. Orders are whispered. The bridge will be destroyed once the rearguard withdraws. Gromov and Kuznetsov exchange a brief look. No words are needed. They understand what must be done. In the fading light, with enemy fire growing closer, they hold their positions, buying precious minutes. When the bridge finally explodes behind them, the sound echoes across the river like a verdict. They withdraw into the darkness, knowing that the price they paid in blood has bought something vital, time to keep the country alive. Smolensk appears through the smoke like a wounded giant. Church domes are blackened, streets are choked with rubble, and the air carries the bitter smell of burning wood and fuel. Soviet units rush to prepare defenses with whatever they have left. Windows are sandbagged, stairwells turned into firing positions, and courtyards dug into shallow trenches. Civilians move silently through the ruins, helping where they can, then disappearing into cellars as the sound of artillery grows closer. The German assault begins before dawn. Shells crash into the city in a steady rhythm, tearing open buildings and collapsing entire blocks. The ground shakes as if the city itself is trying to break free. Sergeant Kuznetsov leads his men through basements and back alleys, avoiding open streets. Gunfire erupts at close range, sudden, brutal, personal. Enemies appear and vanish in smoke-filled corridors. Every room is taken at a cost. When one of his soldiers falls, Kuznetsov does not stop. He clenches his jaw and pushes forward, knowing hesitation means death for the rest. Lieutenant Gromov coordinates what little remains of his platoon from a ruined apartment building. Runners replace radios. Orders are shouted down stairwells and across courtyards under fire. An explosion nearby throws him against a wall, leaving his ears ringing and his vision blurred. Still, he rises and continues, refusing to abandon his men. The weight of command presses on him harder than fear. Each decision means someone may not survive the next hour. Inside a shattered school, Nurse Anna Lebedeva works in near darkness. Desks serve as operating tables, torn curtains as bandages. The wounded arrive faster than they can be treated. Blood pools on the floor, and the cries of pain never stop. When Gromov is carried in, dazed and bleeding, Anna forces herself to stay calm. She cleans his wounds, speaks to him steadily, anchors him to the present. Minutes later, he returns to the fight. There is no farewell, only a shared look that says everything. By midday, the fighting reaches the city center. German tanks grind through narrow streets, infantry following close behind. Kuznetsov crawls forward with a bottle filled with fuel, waits for the right moment, and hurls it. Flames erupt as the tank burns, blocking the street and halting the advance. Cheers are brief and bitter. Everyone knows this victory will not last. Smoke thickens, turning daylight into a red twilight. As night falls, the order arrives: withdraw east in small groups. Smolensk cannot be held. One by one, the defenders slip away through gardens, courtyards, and broken fences, carrying their wounded and their dead in silence. From a hill outside the city, they look back at the fires consuming Smolensk. No one speaks. The city is lost, but the enemy has been delayed. In the quiet after the battle, only the crackle of flames and distant gunfire remains. The soldiers understand what history will later confirm. Here, in the ruins of Smolensk, Operation Barbarossa began to fail. Not because of strategy alone, but because ordinary people refused to collapse. The Great Patriotic War has entered its next, even darker chapter, and they will carry this battle with them for the rest of their lives.